Hello, Heavenly Tears. I've got a lovely discussion today with two beautiful educationalists, people working with children and education and learning. Now, Sue Purvis, I'm going to ask her to explain her work because she's done some beautiful work with children, very different, taking a very different perspective within a classroom setting. And then we have Sarah SheBear, who is working with schools in Uganda, and they're called empowerment centers. We're going to hear both of these because all of these discussions about learning and education are how we're going to structure our future. Ta-da!
There we go. I'm here. I've arrived.
You've got special hair. Have you just done your hair for me?
No.
And basically today we're just going to talk about alternative ways of learning and teaching, and you're going to talk about that through your center and make your appeal as well.
Brilliant.
Yeah. Sue is, I haven't spoken to her before, but I fell for her from a post she made on an eco group, and she just feels like a really good soul the way she's been teaching. So, and she's got an interesting past to that. She's just trying to get on now. She had to wait for me, and now we're trying to get her into this.
I've even got plants now.
Anyway, you got your green.
Exactly, greenery.
Yes, green and white is a lovely deco color. I had an attic room, just jungle wallpaper and in a panel and on the bed, and blinds on the windows, and otherwise just wonderful white, a really amazing refractive white. It was such a good to be in.
Go in with the knowing of flowing.
Oh yeah, go in with the knowing of flowing. Okay, cool. That's how we roll here. Hello, Sue. Hello, Sue. Hi. I apologize.
Hello.
I was telling SheBear that I think a gremlin got into my computer overnight because it was like, I don't know, not treacle. Treacle's too nice for the slow quality of my computer opening up, which is like, ah. So that's, I'm sorry why I'm delayed, but may I introduce the two of you just briefly, and then I'd like to just to each other briefly in my words, and then I'm going to ask, of course, you to talk about all kinds of things. So today's episode is one of many all about activating human potential, but I am very much concerned with children and alternative ways. For me, it's about turning learning 180 degrees inside out to come from the inside, from the spirit, the soul guidance, rather than from the outside in. So Sarah SheBear up there, who is actually known as SheBear, you can possibly tell she's even got her fur. You've got your fur on. And
yes, I'm actually here.
A mama bear, obviously. Now, she is working, and you'll find out this beautiful project with an amazing woman in Uganda called Generous. Isn't that her name? Yeah, I mean, what a name. Set up 3 empowerment centers, and we're going to find that out, but a different way of learning, but working with children to obviously empower them. And because being so frustrated here in the UK, how can you do anything? She has set up something very beautiful over there. And SheBear, Sue, I was just mentioning to you a moment ago, I literally just found her. I found you with that beautiful post you wrote about your experience of learning. And it was so clear that I wanted to be able to hear your voice and your experience, because what I read from that post, you know, it's a nice long post, was someone who worked with the system officially, but you kind of transformed it entirely. That was what I picked up from that. And we need that information because we've got somehow to bridge from where we are now to where we want to go. Can I kind of open the floor to ask you each perhaps to tell us something that you very much love about learning children and education, and also your vision of where you would like it to go? And then I'd love to ask about individual projects and history. Does that sound okay?
Mm-hmm.
Great.
Lovely.
Sue, would you mind starting? Would you mind? So
no pressure.
No, of course. I've got an editing suite as well. I can chop anything out. Don't worry.
Oh, that's good. That's good. What do I love about learning with children? Children are just such sponges, aren't they? They just absorbs everything, and they are just ready and willing to learn things, and everything that you talk to them about, everything you do, they're just really enthusiastic. And I feel that we lose that somewhere along the way when they start going to formal education. They start off really well. I can think of my own two grandchildren to start with. My oldest one is 14, and she absolutely loved school. She was getting awards and certificates every week, model student. And when she got to senior school from year 7, things changed. And I said, how are you getting on at school? I mean, she's still very studious, but she said, oh, I don't like it, she said. In fact, she said, I hate it. You know, we don't learn anything relevant. She's just about to start choosing her options now. So I think she's going to have a little bit more say in what she wants to do. But I think, you know, that creativity, that expression, they lose that once they get a couple of years into schooling. It's all fun at nursery. It's fun at preschool and when they get to infant school. But once they get to juniors, my youngest is going there in September, I think, you know, we're going to see a lot more creativity stifled, because both of them are very artistic, like their grandfather. I'm a little bit creative myself, you know, being a teacher, you have
like
to be. But they are very artistic. They do the most beautiful drawings and pictures that just come alive. And I just think there's so much fun that we can do and have with all of these things that they do. And it doesn't have to be in a classroom sat in rows like they did back in the 1900s. It can be something so different. And I did that. I did change that. When I went to Sweden, I had a lot of freedom. The headmaster, I can't believe my interview. I was a bit nervous because my Swedish was a little bit non-existent when I arrived, and I went on a crash course for 3 months to learn as much as I could, because I had to put the learning objectives on the board in English and Swedish. So I had to master enough to be able to do that. And I went for my interview. It was in January. It was just after the, do you remember San Lucia? They celebrate in Sweden with the candles in their hair. I went for my interview late December, and I spoke to the headmaster to start with. I took my certificates, told him about my background and all the relevant things I thought I needed to take. And then he said, would you like to meet some students? And I said, oh, yes, okay. Anyway, he opened the door and they were all on the landing, and it was about a week since San Lucia, and there was a girl sat there and she had a little tiny little burn on her cheek. And I said, oh, what have you been up to? And she said, oh, I was San Lucia. And she said, and some of the wax came down and melted. I said, oh, that'll soon heal up. And then these young boys came and joined her and said, oh, who are you? And before I knew it, I had a crowd around me, and I started chatting to them. And they were really interested. Where are you from? Oh, you're English. And are you going to come and work here? And then I suddenly froze and thought, oh, I'm in the middle of an interview. What am I doing? And I looked round, and the headmaster's got his arms folded, and he's going,
we like her.
And he said,
it's the best kind of approval, isn't it? If a child comes up to you, I had a 3-year-old say, I want to go and stay at your house. It's like, yes. Yeah.
So I started on the 8th of January in 2016. I had to take over from a teacher that had left suddenly. So I had a few disgruntled students that thought, oh, not another new teacher. But I quickly won them round because I was a breath of fresh air, really. I did things so differently. I wasn't Swedish for a start. We had an influx of people from Syria and Afghanistan, all different places, because that's when, you know, we had a lot of refugees arriving in Sweden. So we had people with English as second, third, even fourth language, and some of them were traumatized. So I had to kind of work a way around that. So my job was quite demanding, really. I mean, that's just one job I did in Sweden. But I mean, and when I came back here, I just thought, what a difference. They have such a different way of doing things. I was called by my first name to start with. They don't wear uniform, and we had a discussion on that so that I could get them to speak English. I said, oh, what do you think about uniforms, and what do you think about tattoos and makeup? And and just got them talking about themselves without them realizing they're learning, you know, making it all fun. And I think that's where teachers have just lost their way, and it's not their fault a lot of the time. They are victims of the system as much as
the
the
system.
children.
It's this, isn't it? We are in a structure, we're in an architecture, we're in a system that we could call the matrix.
Yes.
My tenet of learning is self-directed learning in the prepared environment. And of course, that starts with you, doesn't it? Your spiritual, your emotional, your mental self. And that is what creates that radiation from you to create a field that they feel comfortable in and they trust you, or they don't. And from that, all else unfolds. I'm going to ask you in a moment, and Sarah and SheBear too, I will ask you too, because if you took what you have done and you compared it to the system, what would be the differences? You know, I really want you to kind of hone in on that, because this is the bridge building we're making. Would you mind kind of thinking about that with SheBear? Can you just briefly describe what you're doing with education? And I haven't heard Sue's background. Maybe we can get into that a bit later too, because I think that's really important for people to see where we who love children and learning have come from, because it's usually not a normal teacher training program, is it? So
no.
So
well, I'm not teacher trained. And I just wanted to say about my experience teaching in mainstream, which was quite unique. I have a degree in education studies, so I can teach as a non-qualified teacher. And my speciality is computer science, and I'm very passionate about computers and my technology and so on. And I was sort of given classes of 30 odd children, and we'd set them off. I'd have the syllabus and I'd set them off with their work and so on. But for me, I went round each individual child to see, sorry, I'm going to use the word student, to see how they were getting on, if they had any problems, but also not on a computer level, but also on a personal level. Sort of towards the end of my stint in this mainstream school, I had a sort of an exit interview with the headmaster. He says, "Oh, you've got a very unique way of teaching." I says, "Well, that's because I haven't had any teacher training." And he says, "Yeah, I would come to your classes and look in, and it'll be really loud, but they'd all be working." And I says, "Yeah, you know, that's just how I do it. I'd like to be a guide on the side, not a sage on the stage." And
We've heard that one before.
Yeah, when I was leaving, initially I said to the students, "Oh yes, I'm gonna go and do some teacher training. I'm gonna learn how to teach you properly." And they said, "No, miss, don't do that. You teach us wonderfully. You're the best teacher we've ever had." And that sort of like made me realize I don't need to get teacher training. I don't need to change myself. It's the system that needs to change for me. And that was very eye-opening. And I actually, when I was leaving, my boss said, "Do you know, you're very inspirational. I've learned a lot from you." And that was basically because I said, no, I wasn't going to do teacher training. And I wasn't going to sit in this box. And that gave him the freedom to think about different things. And he actually ended up leaving as well. I don't know where he went to. Wow. But it's just making that connection with the young ones. You know, there was a tall guy and he was outwardly camp. And, you know, and he says, "Oh," and he wanted to shock me. But, you know, I've got friends that are in the thing. I says, "Oh, did you go to Brighton Pride?" and so on. He says, "How do you know about that, miss?" I says, "Oh, I know a lot of things." And he was so pleased that I had connected with him, because he was struggling with that side of his life. So I think for me, I don't look at the individual just based on the subject. I look at the whole being, as it were.
I think that's what puts people who are striving for something different beyond what has been encasing us, is this desire to meet each person as a whole being, whether they're 2.5 or... I met an 80-year-old today in the supermarket, and she was so beautiful. She was so young. I could not believe she was 80. She was someone like us. She had that joyful spirit. And that's what we're looking for, isn't it? You could talk to anyone through that spiritual connection of just the energy of like, oh, like the South Americans say, they greet each other saying, I see the God in you. And it feels like that. It's like, I see this, I see who you are. I don't know what you are yet, but I'm thrilled to get to know it. And that's a very different, a very natural, but very different system from where we've been. Can I just quit, Sue? Can you just say how you got to, because you had a funny story of how you got to the PGCE as well, don't you? So this is fun to kind of just these alternatives.
Yes. Well, I've been around forever, it seems, because I didn't start out teaching. I was my former husband's secretary, and then I did a bit of a sidestep, really, because I went into I was going to do my nurse training in Project 2000. Those of you that are familiar with the nurse training in England, they had a Project 2000 way back then, and then I hurt my back. So I thought, well, do I really want to be, lifting people around in about 30 years' time, or moving them around? We didn't have the legislation way back when I was doing a lot of support work. I was an auxiliary nurse for ages, alongside my husband's business. And then when he closed that down, then I thought, actually, I want to do some kind of health and social care. So I worked in a children's play scheme in the summer and the Easter time. I was a founder member. We set it up predominantly for children with cerebral palsy, but then it expanded to other children, muscular dystrophy, and various other things. And my son was only 6 at the time. And I wanted him to come along with me and see just how other children lived and how their lives were, and how fortunate he was that, he's able-bodied, he can do lots of things a lot of these children can't. And he made best friends with one of the boys there, and they were friends for a long, long time. Sadly, he passed away when he was 21. He had muscular dystrophy, but it taught my son a lot about different people's strengths. Even though they are unable to do certain things, they've got that enthusiasm and drive in another way. So from there, what did I do then? Oh, I did my health and social care. It was called a GMVQ. It's actually the equivalent of 3 A levels. I did that at Fareham College, and that was health and social care advanced. From there, I went on to Winchester and did a degree in learning disabilities. And it's funny how things work out, how you meet certain people, and then it kind of, leads on to something else. And I had a part-time job while I was working my way through uni. I went to do this 3-year program in learning disabilities. And I used to come back to Fareham and do a part-time job at what was Hampshire Training and Enterprise Council that doesn't exist anymore. And I worked in the afternoons. I used to go to my lectures in the morning. In the afternoon, I used to come back to Fareham and work in the afternoon. And I met with a few people that were in training, education. It was all about education and various apprenticeships. And one of the ladies couldn't make this meeting, and I was just coming towards the end of my degree. And she said, I think it would be really good if you went along. She said, there's a man there. He's quite innovative. He's somebody I want you to meet. quite high up in the job centre. I said, oh, okay then. And she said, not only I can't make it anyway, but it would be good for someone to go along. So I went along and I met this man. And he said that he'd got some funding. He was working with Disability Matters in Stockbridge near Winchester with Dr. Stephen, what's his last name? I've forgotten his last name now. Stephen Duckworth.
Oh, Duckworth. Okay.
Yeah, Stephen Duckworth. He works as an advisor to the government now. He got a broken neck when he's 21, had an aspiring career like his family to be a doctor, and then went down the philosophy, psychology route. Anyway, he had a company called Disability Matters. And I went to this meeting and I met up with Nick Edwards, who was working for the Job Centre at the time. And he said he was setting up this project for people with learning disabilities and people that had been at work a long time. And he needed someone to be a personal advisor. It was a new role. It was going to be rolled out by the job centres in 2 pilot areas in the north of England. If it was successful, then they would have a personal advisor in every job centre in the country, which then happened. So my kind of claim to fame, I was a personal advisor for this project. I only went along, spoke to him, and he said, I'd like you to come and have a chat. Again, another chat. It was quite informal. And I went along to Stockbridge and met up with Nick there. He said, well, this is the starting salary. Would you be interested? And I'm thinking, I'm just about to leave uni. I'm just about to get to the end of my contract part-time with the tech. Oh, absolutely. Yes, I'll be very happy to do that. So I worked with them. It was European social funding. So there were a number of projects. One fund would end, another one would start. And then eventually the funding did run out. But we worked with lots of people who'd been forgotten about. They'd been in that revolving door with mental health. We used to do pizza evenings and bring people together, and they loved what we did with them. We were listening to them. Some of them got part-time jobs, some of them got voluntary work, some never went back to work, but at least they were doing something active.
So
when those
I
projects
pause you just for a moment, because I think this is almost like the thing that holds us 3 here together, in that most of my students are left-handed or dyslexic. So
yes, a lot
of them feel that they're stupid or thick because they get lower marks in the normal system, and of course they're not. But we've particularly in the last 5 years, we have come accustomed to that idea of the black sheep of the family, having certain information and tending towards a certain mindset, shall we say, without giving away too much. And it seems that, of course, those who were always at the periphery of the system actually were always the most free. And I think there is no coincidence that your path took you through all these places, the gathering people at the edge of experience, at the edge of the system, at the edge of the structure, to understand them, to embrace them. And of course that builds you, doesn't it, as a person, so that when you go and then confronted with a group of, albeit Swedish children and Syrian and Afghani children, you suddenly have this sort of openness within you, I can imagine, to hold them in a very different way. I think that's sort of what, SheBear, you're doing with your Ugandan project too, isn't it? It's not called a school, it's called an empowerment centre. Can you just sort of chip in there of what that, why and the what of the naming of that, and what the difference is of that? Because I'd like to come back, Sue, into your, from where you got to, but I think it's really nice to kind of put these points in.
Well, basically, Generous set up a school, and it's a non-governmental school in 2009. And when I first met her, she says, oh, no, we just, study from books and so on. And we use corporal punishment. And I'm thinking, well, there's a big gap there. We need to sort that out. So I says, well, how about some alternative life skills type subjects? So we done fashion and design, we done hair and beauty, and we brought agriculture in and so on. So just as we was bringing that in, that's down in South Uganda, a tribe in the North Uganda says, oh, we want something like that because our little ones are traveling, like they need to travel about 2 miles to get to school. And obviously they can't make it, they're too tired and so on. So I says, right, we're going to call it an empowerment center because it will be mainly life skills. So it will be looking at your normal reading, writing and counting and so on. But we're also bringing things like agriculture. We're bringing things that, for example, that area, that culture, what they, you know, if there's sort of the elders have got skills in specific things, we get the elders to pass their skills down to the young people. And also give them a taste of all different things so they can find their passion and find what will drive them, so their work becomes their play and their play becomes their work, you know, in the future life. And, you know, when I said it initially to Generous, she wasn't too sure. And so I sort of done a few talks about it and so on, so she would understand. And I says, you know, if you've got these lovely subjects that the kids really like, firstly, it's been proved that because the children are happy, then they're behaving and the teachers are happy. And then if there's children who decide not to behave quite right in another subject, you can say, oh, well, if you're not going to do this right, you won't be able to do the nice subject, which is a total alternative than being smacked on the knuckles or whatever. And yeah, and these empowerment centers aren't just for children, though. Eventually they will blossom for adults. I know that in the second empowerment center in Assi, the adults there want to come and learn English. And I was saying, well, you can bring in all sorts of experts and get them to teach either the adults or the older children and so on. It doesn't have to be just for children, and that will help to build the community and bring the community together.
And I think this is this is this element of this, the human adult being prepared to hold something that's really interesting, important. For me, my model of education, I studied it in a PhD, finished that in 2000, and I did, my examiner didn't like a word I wrote. He said, I don't agree with anything you wrote, but you argued your case properly. So I got it. Because I looked at things. And of course, I found that subject that when you are in an environment emotionally stable and joy-filled, you retain the information. Boom. You know, that was some very interesting. Capra and his wife, those two did that research, which was really obvious to us, right? But it finally was in a research paper in this, you know, for child psychologists. And this idea of the child and the adult led, for me, for my ideal school, it will be a contractual basis between the child and the adult, that they contract with the adult to be there, to do a course. They will discuss the course of learning they want to do, whether it's for a week, 6 weeks, or for a year, depending on the maturity, obviously, of the child. And that's an arrangement, which means there's responsibility on both sides, and that the adult gets to be who they are fully and express and offer what they can do brilliantly. And the child gets to buy it, choose it through their passion and instigate the interest in it. So it's actually like a really brilliant bartering system, but for learning and for education, where the child's inner passion brings them to a subject of awareness, and then you have the adults that are going to fulfill that. Now, when I think about your description, Sue, with your classroom, I got very much the impression that the classroom was the space, the holding space for this access to information, access to, and that you had this inspiration was sort of surrounding them. So it was not only reminding them of what they had done, but also inspiring them to what and where they could go with their learning mission. And I think that is something you're also intending to do, isn't it, SheBear, with your system? When I think about your fashion project, how literally encouraging the children to sort of, what have we got? We don't have any fabric. Okay, let's use Hessian, and let's see what we can do with Hessian and flour. Was it flour sacks or potato sacks?
It was maize sacks and cement sacks, yes.
And they turned that, they used their designing skills, and they tried it out using this fabric, not a proper fabric, but brilliant for experimentation. And that, of course, develops lateral thinking. But it's this, what do you take from the environment to inspire you, and how do you work in this way, which is very different to a curriculum structure of you must do this, 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 and this. Whereas actually, when we look around us, probably we have extraordinary resources, I would say. You know, just
we had
in my room, you could teach a lot just from looking at one space. You could look at all kinds of things, from color structure to also botany. You could look at all kinds of mathematical systems, you know, with geometry. You could investigate that. You could actually look at even physics. You know, most things you can study by looking at what we have around us. And that's a very, very different paradigm, especially if we want to start a school on a shoestring, like you there, SheBear. Can you just talk about that with the project? And you're looking for some money for it, but kind of explain some of that, because the economics of this system is very important. When we want a new experience for children, it can actually be done in a very different way than we think, with money and resources. And I bet you've got a lot to say about that too, Sue.
With the Second Empowerment Centre, the children actually wandered off with the adults miles around their environment to get big branches, dead branches from trees, so they could then put this up as the structure for their school or their centre building. So, you know, they're learning to be ingenious and learning to use what they've got. You know, you're saying about the sacks dresses. The little children, the toddlers, were wearing them at their culture day. You know, it must have been really rough on their skin, but, you know, they loved it. And it just, again, it brought people together as a community, because the students were creating these garments for the teachers, toddlers and so on. So it's that sense of pride that, oh yeah, look what I've done, and so on. Whereas you don't really get that nowadays. I didn't actually know I was intelligent until the teacher asked me if I wanted to do A-levels. And I was thinking, A-levels? Am I intelligent enough to do that? And they says, yes, of course you are. I thought, well, no one's told me.
That's so sad, though, isn't it? That, you know, you go through the school system believing that you're not good enough.
Mm.
I didn't take my 11 plus because my headmaster told my parents I wasn't capable of passing it. You know, and you go, you know, 10, 11-year-old having that information, you know, you think, well, maybe I'm not very good at what I do. But actually, I just blossomed once I got to secondary school, because I put my head down and I just concentrated on things. But I did a lot better after school, to be quite honest. I was a very late learner going to uni. I was nearly 40 at college, and then onto university. I was the oldest student in my class. It was quite funny, actually, but I was just like one of the girls. They didn't see me as like, oh, she's 40, you know. It was just, I'm just Sue, you know.
Yeah. Well, this sort of non-judgmentalism is from an innocent soul, isn't it? You tend to have very clean souls who operate from this way, and that's why, of course, children resonate with you. You know, just they'll come to you. You just walk down the street, the kids are here. You can't really help it, because you're kind of one of them. And then it's a very harsh world that we're attempting to navigate, you know, that has been, of course, dominated by control structures, power structures, and they've, of course, used money to control and limit us. But here we are, that you know, there's the joy of making something, a little dress out of a sack, for God's sake, you know, these poor babies, but it's a delight of discovery and adventure and this pride, because there are always ways, when the human spirit's active, of defying restrictions. And I love that so much. And that, to have a teacher tell you at 11 that you can't do your exam is appalling, isn't it? Because they're fixed into a system. And when we say, no, sorry, that system is broken, it's wrong, it's, have you not any understanding that that has crushed people? Okay, which meetings get disturbed? Because this may just seem like a cute little chat about education, but it's part of a series that I'm doing, Sue, about changing the world of learning, because eventually I've got people who will blast this out across the USA, across Europe. So this is a seeming innocent chat, but it's part of turning everything inside out. And I think it's funny that on some level that this cute little innocent chat gets stopped and blocked and weird things happen. I wanted to just pose this question then, because I think both of you two have done this, of how we defy this system, which is money dominated. How did you go about doing that? How did you create this rich environment, this possibility, despite the blockades of money, not having enough money to do, you know, the things that you would normally think you need to have? You know, I'm sure that both of you have stories you can illustrate that with, beyond the using the sacks, SheBear. But, you know, how do we get around this? Because there are going to be more and more people saying, hang it, I'm not going to put my child through that they go to a school and they say, hey,
I'm getting
oh, you're chopping up, but just persevere.
Yeah, for me, I actually home educated my youngest son. He had chronic fatigue, and the school didn't really understand what his energy levels weren't going to miraculously improve. So I was also on a low income and so on. So we just, you know, we got out in nature. We, you know, we had a greyhound, so we'd do things that were good old-fashioned cheap fun, which were educational. You know, I got him, if he wanted to do a project, he'd find what he wanted to do through YouTube, and I says, right, we need to do a budget, work out what things you need, how much they're going to cost, the cheapest supplier, and then work out how much we're going to get a month, and then decide what we can buy in each month, so then he could start doing the project and so on. So that was a huge lesson on its own, without actually doing the project. It was the preparation. So I sort of see things like in the old traditional, when we used to do biology experiments, you know, you have your aim, you work out your financial budget and so on to see how you can do it, how you can work it out. That brings in your English and maths, your researching, you know, everything. And then it's just a case of sort of going with the flow. More recently, though, you know, that's how I done it back then, but I'm now on God's payroll. So I'm sort of manifesting what is needed. It's very easy with Uganda, because, you know, £40 will get you a roof on the nursery unit. And, you know, it's only £5 per student per term. But the new learning centre they're just setting up, it's like £12 per student per term.
Wow.
But that's peanuts. And, you know, the exchange rate is more and more in Uganda's favour. So they can do more and more with what we're giving them.
That would be a beautiful little thing. And could you put something together just for the £12, what someone could get for £12? Because I'd like to throw that around wherever I distribute. I could put, if I make I'll make little TikTok videos out of this as well, and you know, just throw that in, because we just don't have this awareness. But
Well,
this,
that's what Buy Me a Coffee is all about. If it's
yes,
£5 per student per term, and it's £5 to get yourself a coffee at Starbucks, I've set up Buy Me a Coffee, but I've changed it into Buy Me a Book. You know, if someone just gives up that one coffee they'd get from these big providers, then that can help a child. That can give a child 3 months tuition.
and that could be an interesting marriage between the children now in schools to understand the economics. So I love what you said about, you know, the budgeting, because that's managerial skills, that's entrepreneurial skills. One of my favorite schools that I studied was, you may both know about it, the Tekos school in Russia, the Anastasia of the Ringing Cedars books supported. And she kind of quotes and talks about those the experiences in that school. I've forgotten the name of the man who's the genius who created that. He's since transitioned, he's not around, but this school was, the children would design the architecture, plan the budget, work with, if necessary, engineers and architects, but they were building their own school. So the astronomy room, you know, they aligned certain aspects of that room to the stars. Then it was reflected in the decor. So those who love to be artistic and creative and expressive, they would be, there's a video where you can see them hand painting the floor, the children. So they had this direct real life experience. And our sweet, poor idiot children, the way we're treating them in our lives is there's sort of this cotton wool safety package that we keep putting tighter and tighter around them, that they don't know where the milk comes from, or what a tangerine is, or why this one is shiny and this one isn't, or how much it costs, or how you can grow it. The real, just tracing one object back to its place of origin should be the learning system. But we've put these levels and levels and levels of divorce from reality, from nature, through our control systems, and you had this weird sense of specialization and dislocation. Sue, can you kind of talk about, your microphone is off, by the way, but could you talk about how you circumnavigated that in your classroom, how you brought this kind of integration of real life into the learning, because that's what I think you did a lot.
I'm turning my video off on the computer so that you don't get disturbed.
Brilliant, clever you.
Okay, so you can hear me okay?
Yes.
Oh, that works. That's good. So there was a couple of things that I wanted to say to you. I made a note of. I know it wasn't directly in answer to some of your questions, but I missed some of that. How I got to do my training. What happened was the European Social Funding funded project came to an end, and I was looking for work, and I went along to the college and said, would you let me work for free for half a day a week? I'd like to go into teaching, but I don't know how to go about it. And I spoke to the vice principal, Martin Simmons, at the time at City College in Southampton, and he said, "Oh, come sit down, let's have a chat." So he liked my enthusiasm, and he said, "Well, as it happens, we have a teacher that is all sick at the moment. Would you like to come and teach one of the units called communication?" I thought, well, this is right up my street. So I went on a Wednesday morning and I taught communication. Now, before I left his office, he said, "Oh, by the way, I will need from you a scheme of work and a lesson plan." I said, "Yes, no problem." And he said, "Oh, well, we need to get you signed up for PGCE." So he picks up the phone and this teacher came running down the corridor. He said, "I've got another one for your class that starts this week." And I'm sitting there thinking, "Oh, what's the scheme of work? What's the lesson plan?"
Have you done any real interviews, Sue?
Right, I'm going to look all this up and I'll have this by Monday. So I did, and I sent it to him. He said, "Yeah, no problem."
Well, you see, every part of that is you working out of the box, isn't it?
Yes.
That's the massive lesson of that.
Yes. And I had some lovely students. I mean, these were people that were 16 plus, but we did have 14-year-olds that had left school early, lots of different reasons. You know, Southampton is a city with a lot of social issues. And some of the students, you know, when you get to know a lot of their family backgrounds, you think, how they even get out of bed in the morning is a miracle, let alone come to college. So it was great that we had students that would go to course. They could tell you so many stories.
Well, how did you keep them there then? This is a beautiful moment. How did you keep them in that course?
In the college?
Yeah.
I would get them to do things that they wouldn't normally do. I'd make the lessons very practical. We would have food tasting sessions. You know, the ones that disengaged with school didn't want more of the same. So we had to make it interesting. They were so used to being told off, don't do this, sit down, you know, put your hand up to go to the toilet. And I think that's appalling. If a child needs the toilet, they go, you know, and if you can't trust them to go to the toilet, well, you know, that's just very sad, I think.
Yes, it's like all the natural things have just disappeared. And only this system was held up like some kind of godhead. And the real true things, which are direct experience with real things, have been thrown out of our educational system.
I took a group of students. Now, bear in mind that a lot of them grew up in a city, and seeing greenery was quite alien to some of them. And we got some minibuses, and we went down to a place where there's a natural spring. They didn't know about it. In fact, a lot of people didn't know about it. I knew where it was because we collect water from there. And I took this group of students there, and I said, right, we're going to collect some water, we're going to take it back, and we're going to taste it and see what you think.
Yeah.
Just the idea of going out in nature, away from the city, away from the classroom. You know, a lot of these students probably had, you know, depression, mental health issues from their family backgrounds. I had one student, he stood at the edge where the water was, and she put her arms on the fence and she said, "This is so peaceful, I don't want to go back to college, this is lovely." And she just had a moment there where she was just reflecting on being surrounded by greenery.
So why, you know, if I had a discussion with one of the learning support staff at somewhere I work, she would say, "Oh, but we must now have terrorist alerts, and we must know at all moments where every child is, and they must do things at the same time, and they can only go to the loo at the end of a lesson because otherwise we can't track them." Basically, control, 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 control. And that's coming down from governmental edicts and some kind of expectations generated by the media. How on earth do we get around that and just say, hey, we're dealing with human beings here?
Well, if we're going to get the system changed, we've got to get people on board that make decisions and show the results of how different children are when they are treated in a different way and they are allowed to express themselves. Ofsted always said you should take advantage of a learning opportunity, and this completely went out of the window. When I came back from Sweden, I literally flew home on a Sunday, and I had an interview for a job in a primary school on a Monday. And they wanted me to prepare a lesson in maths for a year 5 group. So I did all this in Sweden. I had it all printed out before I left. And I came to the school, and it was a Roman Catholic school. I didn't like all the pictures that they had around the walls, but I tried to overlook that. And I went into the classroom, and there were all these children sat there, and a teacher that was going to observe me. Well, I started off the conversation because they're looking at me thinking, well, who are you? And I told them, I got off a plane yesterday. I've come all the way from Sweden to see you today.
Oh, lovely.
This little boy, his whole face lit up, and he put his hand up and said, oh, miss, can you speak Swedish? And I said, well, yes, I can, a little bit. And he said, oh, well, how do you say this in Swedish? And I was going to take advantage of that being a maths lesson and to teach them some numbers in Swedish.
Oh.
And this teacher had a face like a slapped backside, and she looked at me, and she looked at him, and she said, sit down, you are not speaking Swedish, and you're going to be doing math.
Wow.
And I thought, I don't want to work here. These poor children. But, you know, that you could see the enthusiasm. They were ripe for learning something new.
Yeah.
That could have led on to something, you know, let's all learn how to say this in Swedish. Okay, how many times can you count up to 10 in Swedish? And can you add these numbers together in Swedish? And that would have been a nice challenge and something so different.
And so enriching, rather than the scarcity mindset of we can only learn one thing at a time. I have a thing, Sue, that you can teach A-level maths by designing and building a treehouse. Because you can.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that's the thing that's really got to change. It's that narrow field. And it's because people are so scared, isn't it? They're terrified of being judged for doing something wrong in the system. And they're just full of fear.
I wondered, you know, if we capture the enthusiasm of the newer teachers before they lose all of that motivation from being entrenched in the system, because there's a lot of teachers that have left their jobs because they're so disillusioned. I wonder if it would be better if we try and get some people that are younger, but also the experience of those that are older that haven't lost that zest for life and that childlike outlook on life.
Yes. I'll tell you guys something I'm about to be involved in, which is hilarious and brilliant. A school, basically a modern day Hogwarts.
Lovely.
For developing all the psionic abilities of children and adults. Now, I've been developing a program of teacher training for the kind of learning we're talking about, which is very different from a university system. But that is what I realized I need to now concentrate on, is reaching the adults, the would-be teachers, the ones who want to change over, and showing them it is possible, giving them encouragement, just like SheBear does with Generous out in Uganda, changing their minds, showing it's possible. And your example, Sue, of talking about these 14 and 16-year-olds who wanted to leave, but found a way through the opportunities you gave them to stay and to enjoy what they were doing. It's great to bring these examples out. I'm going to have more panels of lots of different people talking about specific things over the next few months. And I'd love to invite you back to talk about some specific things in bigger scale. You know, this is just like a general dive in, introduce. And partly I really wanted SheBear on because we're raising money again for this third empowerment center. But because it's possible there in Uganda to do something different, it's like, let's do it, you know.
Exactly. I think the key is that when children are learning, everyone involved needs to be learning. You know, the adults need to be learning about how they can best provide something that will enlighten and infuse the children. The children are learning how they can best sort of, you know, get enjoyment for themselves. And I think for me, learning doesn't stop. You know, with the current teachers, they think they know it all. But there's so much more. You know, learning doesn't stop once you've finished your degree course or doctorate and so on. And then you go and impart it to other people. Learning continues, and we have to be open-minded and open our hearts to the fact that we are all still in progress, and we always will be until we leave this world, or possibly not. We may still be learning elsewhere. So I think that's the key, and we need to have open-minded people that you know, embrace this way of being, to then start setting up these empowerment centers. And I think we need to throw out the concept of a school. I think the term is outdated, and if we start repackaging it as empowerment centers, youth centers.
Well, mine is called the speaking house. In other words, a
That's it.
place you can be expressive freely.
Exactly. You know, I think that's the key, because then we bring in learning activities that isn't curriculum, that isn't authoritarian and patriarchy led.
I love it. Would you love to respond to that that SheBear said, because it would be a beautiful way to finish it off?
I just wanted to say on this, because SheBear teaches on computer science. I worked with Google Classroom in Sweden before it was even used in the UK, and that was such a good way of getting the parents involved, especially with learning English. I used to put so many resources on there, videos, games, all sorts of things. And the parents said how much they'd learned, and also they help their children, and even the ones that were all sick could sit at home and work on things. So that's another thing that can be done, using the computers
in a positive way, rather than the hypnotizing, turn into a zombie attached to the screen way. Yes,
definitely.
Foraging, going out in nature, and all the natural things. I love colour. You know, this is why I think that I relate so well to children. You said about children just so attracted to you, Isabel, and I find when I'm out anywhere, children in their prams even, they look round, they're straining their necks and beaming. I'm sure they pick up the energy because they're still so young.
yeah. They can still see stuff, can't they, that we may have forgotten how to see. Well, I have absolutely loved talking to you both today. I know we've had a few technical fun things. I can smooth some of that out using the computer, not all of it, but some of it, and hope to bring you guys together for another table, and we will take maybe one subject, like a prepared environment, a classroom. You know, what is that? What is a classroom? And look at that, because I think you would have a lot to say, both of you, about that, and blow people's minds open, which is what we have to do.
Definitely.
Good. Oh, it's been lovely to meet both of you. It's just so inspiring to see other people that feel the same way as I do. And you know, there are people like us out in the world. We just need to connect with each other.
That's the job of now. So you just encouraged me even more. And I'm going to put all the links for SheBear's work for people who want to give a coffee or £12, because it will do miracles in what she's creating. And until we meet again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Bye for now. Thank you.
Okay.
Bye. So, you know, we'll see what we do with this, but I think this is just the start of getting a whole new movement. And the thing I really want to concentrate on is training adults.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Well, it's just allowing adults to be themselves, isn't it?
Yes, yes, just to open
It's
up who
not
they
that
are and connect.
you
That's
don't
it.
need to you don't need to train them. It's already innately in them.
Yes,
You just
that's
got
the
to
point.
pull that out.
Well, that is the training. It's almost like it's like taking off all the coats.
It's
Finding out who
untraining.
the person is. It's untraining and it's reconnecting. That's all it is. Yes.
Exactly.
Yes. Yes. I'm going to put that bite in because it's still recorded. Okay. It's so lovely. It can still hear us, which is nice.
Yeah.
So I'm going to put a few images of the Tekos school in there. I can just grab some stills from those videos that are still available online, showing how the children are constructing and making, because again, this is this mindset to bring the children into
Exactly.
a normal experience, and that's how they learn. Duh.
That's what I wanted to bring. That's why I was so pleased that the Ugandan children were actually getting involved with building their own center.
Yeah. Wonderful. Sue,
Great one.
lovely to know you're still there, and lots of love to you. I'm so happy that we got to know you a bit, and until the next time.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Love you. Bless you both. Bye.
Bye.